Starting Monday, Ryan will serve as CEO. For a second, I honestly thought my father had misspoken. I sat frozen at the conference table while department heads from across Bennett Harbor Hotel turned toward my brother. 3 weeks earlier, I had sold the condo I'd spent 7 years paying for and put $410,000 into this hotel to stop the bank from moving toward foreclosure. I had negotiated with creditors, stabilized payroll, and helped keep nearly 60 employees from wondering whether they'd still have jobs. Ryan hadn't contributed a dollar. Yet there he was, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied little smirk. My mother cleared her throat. "Claire," she stopped, embarrassed. "Tasha, Ryan is simply more of a leader. You've always been better behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. Apparently, that was where you belonged after selling your home to save everyone else. Ryan adjusted his jacket. "Don't worry, Tash, there'll still be plenty for you to help with." I looked at my parents. "So I saved the hotel so Ryan could run it." Dad's expression hardened. "You helped your family. That shouldn't come with conditions." I could have exploded. Instead, I looked at the organizational chart projected onto the wall. Ryan Bennett, CEO. My parents remained owners. And beneath them, in a small box that carried no real operational authority, Tasha Bennett, strategic advisor. That was when I stopped arguing. I pulled out my phone and photographed the screen. Ryan actually smiled wider, as if my silence meant he'd won. "Good," Dad said, apparently relieved. "We can move forward." I closed my folder. "Absolutely." Then I stood and walked out. Nobody followed me. That told me everything. They expected me to calm down, return tomorrow, and continue doing the difficult work while Ryan enjoyed the title. That was how things had always worked in our family. Ryan got trusted with opportunities. I got trusted with disasters. But this disaster was different. In the parking lot, I sat inside my car and opened the financing agreement my parents had signed before my $410,000 entered the hotel. Page after page passed beneath my thumb until I reached one particular clause. I read it twice. Then I found a number in my contacts and pressed call. A man answered. "Tasha, I wondered when I'd hear from you. I need you to start monitoring the Bennett Harbor account." There was a brief silence. "Has something happened?" I looked back at the hotel my condo had paid to save. My brother just became CEO. And if everyone expected me to call a lawyer, demand my money back, or start a family war, they were wrong. Because why was I calling a restructuring firm instead? 2 days later, Ryan summoned me to the CEO's office. Not Dad's old office. His office. He had already replaced the brass nameplate on the door. Ryan Bennett, Chief Executive Officer. When I walked in, he was sitting behind the desk with his sleeves rolled up, studying a stack of papers like someone posing for a business magazine. "Perfect timing," he said. "Close the door." I remained standing. Ryan pushed several folders toward me. "I need operating reports by Friday, vendor forecasts too, and go through staffing, tell me where we can cut without hurting service." I stared at the folders. "You want me to do the operational analysis? You're good at that stuff. But I'm a strategic advisor now." His smile disappeared. "Tasha, don't start." "I'm not starting anything. You have operational authority, I don't." Ryan leaned back. "So this is bitterness?" "No, it's clarity." He laughed under his breath. "Mom and Dad picked me because people respond to confidence. You bury yourself in spreadsheets and worst-case scenarios." I glanced at another document on his desk. It was a proposal for a complete lobby redesign. Beside it sat paperwork for an executive vehicle lease. "What is all this?" Ryan brightened immediately. "My relaunch." He began listing the plans as if he were unveiling a masterpiece. A redesigned lobby, an influencer weekend, management bonuses, and a leased luxury SUV for executive transportation. I picked up the renovation proposal. Ryan, the hotel barely survived foreclosure. And that's exactly why it needs to look successful. We have almost no cash cushion. He waved that away. You saved us, now I'm going to grow us. By spending the reserve. By investing. I put the proposal down. Appearances are what nearly killed this hotel the first time. His jaw tightened. And that cautious mentality is exactly why you're not sitting in this chair. There it was. For years, that sentence would have sent me straight into rescue mode. I would have stayed until midnight rebuilding his budget, calling vendors, finding compromises, anything to keep the family from suffering because Ryan had made another reckless decision. This time, I simply nodded. All right. Ryan blinked. All right. You're CEO. I gathered the folders he'd pushed toward me and placed them back on his desk. So you make the decisions. I walked outside, scanned the spending approvals I had seen, and emailed them to my financial advisor. Her response came 20 minutes later. Nothing here independently triggers your protections yet, but he's getting dangerously close. Document everything. I stared at those words. For the first time, I understood exactly what my family had been counting on. They believed they could give Ryan the authority because I would quietly protect him from the consequences. I wouldn't. Before leaving that evening, I passed Ryan near the elevators. He gave me a smug look. Changed your mind about those reports? No. I pressed the elevator button. If you want the authority, you also get the consequences. The doors closed between us. That afternoon, Ryan signed his first major renovation contract without my approval. By the time accounting processed the commitment, most of the hotel's remaining reserve was spoken for. By the time Ryan's relaunch weekend arrived, Bennett Harbor Hotel looked healthier than it actually was. Fresh flowers filled the lobby. Photographers moved between guests. Local business owners, vendors, employees, and invited influencers gathered beneath a banner announcing a new era ATBENNETT Harbor ***. Ryan stood in the center of it all. 6 weeks earlier, we had been discussing foreclosure. Now my brother was holding a champagne glass and telling a crowd, sometimes a struggling business doesn't need saving. It needs leadership. People applauded. I stood near the back. Not once did he mention the $410,000 that had actually stopped the hotel from collapsing. Mom looked proud. Dad practically glowed. Then someone touched my arm. It was Mr. Delgado, whose company had supplied the hotel restaurant for years. Tasha, can I ask you something? Of course. He lowered his voice. Why haven't we been paid? My stomach tightened. What do you mean? 3 invoices, all overdue. Before I could answer, the restaurant manager hurried across the lobby toward Ryan. Ryan, we have a problem. Ryan lowered his glass. Can this wait? Our food supplier suspended deliveries. Several nearby guests heard him. Ryan's smile vanished. What? They won't release Monday's shipment until the outstanding balance is paid. Ryan glanced around and realized people were watching. Instead of lowering his voice, he snapped, Then maybe your department should learn how to manage supplier relationships. The manager stared at him. This is an accounting issue. Don't blame accounting because you can't manage your vendors. I stepped forward. Ryan. He turned. You delayed their payments, didn't you? His face told me before his mouth did. We're reallocating cash. To renovations and marketing. Dad immediately interrupted. Tasha, this isn't the place. That surprised me more than Ryan's answer. A supplier had stopped deliveries, and Dad was worried about me embarrassing Ryan. Ryan straightened his jacket. Exactly, we're here to talk about growth. Then, unbelievably, he climbed onto the small presentation stage. Minutes later, he announced ***phase 2* of his renovation plan. The crowd applauded. I looked at Mr. Delgado. He wasn't clapping. Neither were several employees. Ryan was spending money the hotel didn't have while withholding money from the businesses, keeping it operational. I'd seen this pattern before. It was how Bennett Harbor had nearly died the first time. I found our bookkeeper near reception. "Preserve every financial record from the past 6 weeks," I whispered, "and send everything required under the financing agreement directly to the outside accountant." She nodded. Ryan saw us. "What are you doing?" Several department heads turned toward us. "Making sure the records are current. You don't have authority here anymore." "I don't need operational authority for reporting required by an agreement the owners signed." His expression changed. "I'm CEO. If necessary, I can remove you from hotel operations completely." I looked past him at Mom and Dad. Both had suddenly gone quiet. "Then you should probably check whether being CEO lets you override agreements signed by the owners." Ryan opened his mouth. Before he could answer, our outside accountant appeared beside me. Her face was serious. "Tasha." "What?" She glanced at Ryan, then lowered her voice. Ryan just crossed the threshold. My phone started ringing at 7:12 the next morning. "Dad." I let it ring twice before answering. "Tasha, get to the hotel." "What happened?" "Just come." When I entered the conference room 40 minutes later, the celebration banners from Ryan's relaunch were still hanging downstairs. Upstairs, nobody was celebrating. Mom sat rigidly beside Dad. Ryan paced near the windows. Our outside accountant had spread financial statements across the table. She pointed to the first page. "The required reserve has fallen below the minimum." Ryan stopped packing. "Temporarily." She ignored him and turned another page. "There are also significant new liabilities that exceeded the agreed approval limits, plus overdue obligations to essential vendors." Ryan slammed his palm onto the table. "We have bookings coming." The accountant looked directly at him. "You were already counting those bookings when you authorized this spending." His phone buzzed. Ryan glanced down. Whatever he read drained the color from his face. Dad noticed. "What?" Ryan didn't answer. "Ryan." He finally looked up. "Westbridge postponed their conference." Mom frowned. "The corporate event." "Our largest upcoming event." Ryan nodded. "They're concerned the renovations could interfere with their program." That revenue had been central to Ryan's projections. And now it was gone. Dad turned toward me. "What exactly have you been doing, Tasha?" "Documenting decisions." "For what?" "To establish whether the hotel remained compliant with the financing agreement." Ryan stared at me. Then he grabbed the document in front of the accountant and began flipping through it. His movement slowed. "This says secured financing." Nobody answered. Ryan looked at Dad. "I thought her money went into the hotel." "It did," Dad said. "As a loan." Dad rubbed his forehead. "Tasha's company provided the emergency financing. No bank would move quickly enough. We accepted the terms." Ryan looked at me as if I had hidden something from him. "You set this up." "You mean the agreement Mom and Dad signed?" Mom leaned forward. "Tasha, what happens now?" I slid the contract toward her. "Read the cure provisions." "Don't do this," Ryan said. "I'm not doing anything to you." "You've been waiting for me to fail." "No, I've been waiting to see whether you'd correct what you were warned about." The accountant explained what had to happen. Freeze discretionary spending, renegotiate the renovation obligations, restore required reserves, and address overdue vendors within the contractual cure period. Dad turned to Ryan. "Cancel the next renovation phase." Ryan's head snapped toward him. "No." "Ryan." "I announced it publicly yesterday. What do you think happens if I cancel it today?" You protect the hotel, I said. He glared at me. I look incompetent. There it was. The choice. Not between Ryan and me. Between his image and the hotel. And he chose his image. I'm not canceling anything. I stood. Mom whispered, Tasha. But I was already walking toward the door. It opened before I reached it. The restructuring advisor I'd called from the parking lot after Ryan became CEO stepped inside carrying a slim folder. Ryan looked from him to me. What is this? The advisor walked to the table and placed the formal notice in front of my father. Ryan started, You can't just walk in here and... The advisor interrupted him. From this moment forward, Ryan cannot authorize another dollar. Ryan stared at the notice. Then he laughed. Not because anything was funny. It was the short, disbelieving laugh of someone who had spent weeks believing he held all the power. You can't do this, he said. The restructuring advisor remained standing beside the table. Tasha isn't doing anything that wasn't agreed to. Ryan turned toward our parents. Tell him. Dad didn't. Instead, he pulled the financing agreement toward himself. That was when everything finally came into the open. When Bennett Harbor Hotel had been days away from losing its financial lifeline, I had been prepared to sell my condo and transfer every dollar directly to my parents. My accountant stopped me. She had asked one question. If this hotel fails anyway, what protects you? I hadn't had an answer. So the $410, zero from my condo sale, went through my consulting company as secured emergency financing. Mom and Dad had known. They had signed every page. The hotel remained theirs as long as they maintained basic financial safeguards. Minimum reserves, limits on major new obligations, current essential vendor accounts, and other protections designed to prevent another collapse. Ryan becoming CEO hadn't triggered anything. I couldn't remove him because I was angry. I couldn't seize control because Mom called him a better leader. The agreement didn't protect my feelings. It protected my money. And Ryan had triggered it himself. He had drained reserves, created obligations beyond agreed limits, delayed essential vendor payments, and when given the chance to correct those problems, refused because canceling his projects might embarrass him. Ryan slowly dropped into his chair. So that call you made after the staff meeting. I called the restructuring firm. You were planning this. I was protecting what I had already sacrificed. His face hardened. You let me fail. No. I pushed copies of his approvals across the table. Your signature. Another document. Your signature. Then another. Yours again. Ryan stopped looking at them. Mom spoke quietly. Why didn't you warn us more forcefully? I looked at her. I did warn you. She opened her mouth. I continued. You told me Ryan was more of a leader. Dad told me helping family shouldn't come with conditions. Ryan told me my caution was why I wasn't CEO. Dad lowered his eyes. So I stopped being the person who cleaned up every decision after nobody listened. Ryan stood abruptly. You think this proves you're better than me? No, it proves authority has consequences. For once, he had nothing to say. But I didn't want Bennett Harbor sold off to satisfy the debt. Too many employees had already survived one crisis. So I offered another option. A restructuring. My company would reorganize the existing debt and provide tightly controlled additional working capital. In exchange, my parents would transfer controlling shares to my company. Dad read the proposal twice. Mom asked, and Ryan? He's no longer CEO. Ryan pushed his chair backward. Then I'm done. I nodded. That's your decision. He refused the operational role available under the new structure and left the hotel entirely. Over the next several weeks, his version of Bennett Harbor disappeared piece by piece. The second renovation phase was canceled. The first contract was renegotiated. The executive SUV went back. Vendors received written repayment schedules. Mr. Delgado resumed deliveries after we settled the oldest invoices. And the management bonuses Ryan had planned never happened. The biggest change, though, was on paper. My parents became minority owners. My company held control. The daughter who was supposedly better, behind the scenes, became Bennett Harbor Hotel's controlling managing owner. Ryan lost the title he'd been handed. My parents lost the ability to hand control back to him. And I stopped sacrificing myself just to make everyone else's choices painless. A year later, Bennett Harbor wasn't flashy. It was stable. Cash reserves were healthy again. Vendor relationships had been repaired. Renovations happened only when revenue could support them. I still hadn't bought another condo. I rented a modest apartment and rebuilt my savings slowly. My relationship with Mom and Dad survived, but it wasn't the same. We spoke. We worked together when necessary. But family was no longer a magic word that could make me surrender my boundaries. One afternoon, I walked into the same conference room where Ryan had once been announced as CEO. The organizational chart had changed. At the top was my name. I stood there for a moment, remembering Ryan's smirk and Mom telling me I belonged behind the scenes. Then I switched off the screen and went downstairs to work. I had sold my home to save my family's hotel once. But the second time I saved it, I made sure nobody could ever take my sacrifice, my authority, or my future away from me again.